5 minutes can change everything. For Elena Vance, it took exactly that long for bullets to shatter a Manhattan fundraiser, for a tattooed hand to find her pulse, and for the city's most feared mafia boss to whisper 3 words that would destroy her carefully invisible life. You're in danger. 12 years she'd hidden. 12 years since the massacre that erased her family and buried her name. Now, with Luca Moretti's arms around her and security cameras capturing every second, her past is about to collide with his empire in ways neither of them can control. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The crystal chandeliers of the Plaza Astor Ballroom threw diamonds of light across 500 of Manhattan's elite, and Elena Vance moved through them like smoke, present but unnoticed, essential but invisible. She'd perfected this particular disappearing act over 12 years, turning herself into background noise at events where a single glass of champagne cost more than her weekly rent. "Champagne, sir?" She offered the tray with her eyes downcast, her posture angled just slightly away. The tech billionaire didn't even glance at her face as he plucked a flute from the silver surface. Perfect. Elena had learned early that survival meant mastering the art of being overlooked. She kept her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wore the standard black and white server uniform that made her interchangeable with 24 other staff members, and cultivated a particular quality of stillness that made people's gazes slide right past her. It was a skill born of necessity, of nights spent hiding in closets while men with guns searched for a little girl who'd seen too much, of years in witness protection, moving from city to city, name to name, always one step ahead of people who wanted her dead for reasons she'd never fully understood. Until tonight, it had worked flawlessly. "The crab cakes are going out in 2 minutes, her supervisor Marcus hissed as she returned to the service station. "And table 7 needs their wine refreshed. The Chateau Margaux, not the Petrus. Don't mix them up again." "I didn't mix them up last time," Elena said mildly. "Mrs. Henderson changed her mind after I'd already poured." Marcus's perpetual scowl deepened. "Just don't screw up tonight. There are people here who could have us both fired with a single phone call." Elena nodded, already scanning the room with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years watching for threats in crowded spaces. The usual suspects: politicians glad-handing donors, socialites air-kissing rivals, business magnates negotiating deals over canapes. Security was tight. She'd counted at least 15 guards plus whatever private protection the high-profile guests had brought with them. Standard for a fundraiser hosted by the Castellano Foundation, which had raised over $200 million for various charitable causes, while its founder, Victor Castellano, simultaneously ran one of the largest money laundering operations on the East Coast. Not that anyone in this room would acknowledge that particular truth. Elena lifted a fresh tray of champagne and wove back into the glittering crowd. The string quartet in the corner transitioned into something classical and romantic. A woman in a dress that probably cost more than Elena's car laughed too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. The air smelled of expensive perfume, fresh flowers, and the particular variety of desperation that came from people trying too hard to look like they belonged. She was halfway to table 7 when she felt it, that prickling awareness at the back of her neck that had kept her alive through a dozen close calls. Someone was watching her, not in the casual, absent way people glanced at servers. This was different, focused, intent. Elena's fingers tightened imperceptibly on the tray. She continued her path without breaking stride, but her peripheral vision swept the room in controlled arcs. There, by the tall windows overlooking Central Park, a man in an impeccably tailored black suit, dark hair swept back from a face that managed to be both beautiful and dangerous. He wasn't pretending to look at anything else. His eyes were locked directly on her. Luca Moretti. Even people who'd never seen him in person knew that face. It had been plastered across the front page of the New York Post at least a dozen times in the past year alone. The FBI had investigated him for everything from racketeering to murder. The tabloids called him Manhattan's most eligible criminal. His family had controlled significant portions of the city's underground economy for 3 generations. And he was staring at Elena like she was the only person in a room of 500. Her pulse kicked up despite every effort to stay calm. This was wrong. Men like Luca Moretti didn't notice women like her, women who'd specifically designed their entire existence around not being noticed. She must have made a mistake, drawn attention somehow. Maybe he was looking at someone behind her, or... No. His gaze tracked her movement as she set down champagne flutes at table 7. When she straightened, his eyes were still there, dark and unreadable across the distance. Elena turned away, forcing herself to maintain the same even pace as she headed back toward the service station. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had someone from her past recognized her? Had her cover been compromised? The U.S. Marshals who'd managed her protection until she'd aged out of the program at 18 had warned her that people with long memories and longer grudges might still be looking for the little girl who disappeared 12 years ago. But why would that connect her to Luca Moretti? Elena. Marcus grabbed her elbow the moment she reached the back corridor. What the hell did you do? Her stomach dropped. What? Luca Moretti just asked the event coordinator who you were. Marcus's face had gone pale beneath his perpetual flush. He specifically pointed you out. Do you have any idea what kind of attention that brings? If you've gotten yourself mixed up in something, I haven't done anything, Elena said, and it was the truth. She'd been so careful. 12 years of being nobody, going nowhere, making no waves. I don't even know him. Well, he seems to know you. Marcus released her arm, but his expression remained suspicious. Just stay out of sight for the rest of the night. Last thing we need is that kind of trouble. Elena nodded mutely and retreated further into the service corridor, her heart hammering. Through the doorway, she could still see slices of the ballroom, the glittering dresses, the champagne flutes, the careful choreography of wealth and power. And Luca Moretti, now speaking with Victor Castellano himself, though his attention kept drifting toward the service entrance where Elena had disappeared. She should leave. Clock out early, claim she was sick, get as far away from this situation as possible. That's what the scared 12-year-old version of herself would have done. The one who'd hidden in closets and learned to make herself invisible. But Elena hadn't survived this long by running every time something felt off. She'd survived by staying alert, gathering information, and only running when the threat was confirmed and imminent. So she stayed in the corridor, partially hidden by the elaborate flower arrangement on a side table, and watched. The party continued its glittering rotation. Speeches were given. Donations were announced to polite applause. Elena tracked Moretti's position in the room haute with the precision of someone who'd spent years monitoring potential threats. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, shaking hands and exchanging words with people who were either genuinely pleased to see him or excellently skilled at hiding their fear. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Elena was beginning to think Marcus had overreacted, that whatever had drawn Moretti's attention had been random, meaningless when she saw them. 3 men entering through the main ballroom entrance. Dark suits, blank expressions, moving with the kind of coordinated purpose that set every instinct Elena possessed screaming. Security stopped them briefly, checked something, credentials probably, and waved them through. But Elena had seen men like this before. 12 years ago, on the worst night of her life, men exactly like this had walked into her family's home with the same empty eyes and mechanical movements. Her breath caught. One of them scanned the room with cold efficiency, and when his gaze passed over the area where Elena stood half-hidden, it snagged, stopped, focused. He'd found her. Elena's mind went blank with pure animal terror. Then training kicked in, the drills the marshals had made her practice, the escape routes she automatically mapped everywhere she went. The service corridor connected to the kitchen. The kitchen had an exit to the loading dock. If she moved now quickly but not panicking enough to draw attention, she turned to run and walked directly into a solid wall of expensive suit and controlled strength. Luca Moretti stood in the corridor behind her, having approached in complete silence. This close, she could see the details the tabloid photos never quite captured. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the flecks of amber in dark eyes, the way he held himself with the absolute stillness of someone who'd never needed to prove how dangerous he was. His hand closed around her wrist, not painfully, but with unmistakable authority. "Don't run," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with the faintest trace of an accent that expensive education hadn't quite erased. "They're here for you. If you run now, everyone will see, everyone will remember, and then you'll never be invisible again." Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. "Let me go." "Can't do that." His thumb pressed against her racing pulse point, and something shifted in his expression. "You're in danger. Those men aren't here for the party. Pretend I'm your man." "What?" But Moretti was already moving, turning her so her back pressed against the wall, his body angling to shield her from view of the main ballroom. To anyone glancing their way, it would look like an intimate moment. a couple stealing privacy in a quiet corridor. His hand came up to cup her jaw with surprising gentleness. Listen to me very carefully, Elena Vance. In approximately 30 seconds, those men are going to start looking for you. When they do, I need you to trust me. How do you know my name? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. What do you want? What I want is complicated. His eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. What you need is simple. You need to stay alive through the next 5 minutes. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put your arms around my neck. You're going to look at me like I'm the only person in the world who matters. And when the shooting starts, when the what? The first gunshot cracked through the air like a champagne bottle exploding. For one frozen heartbeat, the ballroom went silent. Then chaos erupted in a wave of screams and shattering glass. Moretti's arms locked around Elena, pulling her against his chest as more shots rang out. Through the doorway, she caught flashes of the scene. Guests dropping to the floor, security drawing weapons. The 3 men who'd entered minutes ago now firing methodically into the crowd. But they weren't firing randomly. One of them was moving toward the service corridor, toward her. Trust me, Moretti said against her ear. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was claiming, possessive, designed to look like passion to anyone watching. His hand tangled in her hair, pulling the severe bun loose so dark waves fell around her shoulders. His body pressed her against the wall, blocking her completely from view. And every security camera in the Plaza Astor captured the moment. Elena's mind reeled. This wasn't protection. This was performance. He was making a statement, marking territory, ensuring that anyone reviewing the footage would see exactly what he wanted them to see. The gunfire was getting closer. Moretti pulled back just enough to look at her, and his expression had transformed into something calculating and cold. Hold on to me, he ordered. Then he lifted her, actually lifted her off her feet, and strode toward the chaos instead of away from it. What are you doing? Elena gasped, but Moretti ignored her. They emerged into the ballroom, and Elena's breath stopped. The elegant space had been transformed into a war zone. Tables overturned, champagne glasses shattered. People huddled behind whatever cover they could find. The 3 gunmen had spread out, still firing in controlled bursts, and they all turned when Moretti appeared with Elena in his arms. Stand down, Moretti's voice cut through the chaos with absolute authority. She's under my protection. The gunmen hesitated. One of them, the one who'd locked onto Elena earlier, kept his weapon raised. We have orders. I don't care about your orders. Moretti's tone could have frozen nitrogen. You want her, you go through me, and we both know how that ends. A tense silence stretched. Elena could feel Moretti's heart beating steady and slow against her side, like this was just another day, just another confrontation, like he stood between armed killers and their targets all the time. Maybe he did. The gunman's finger tightened on the trigger. Elena saw it happening in slow motion, saw the decision crystallize in his empty eyes. Another shot rang out, but not from the 3 intruders. One of Moretti's men, Elena hadn't even seen him enter, fired from the balcony level. The bullet took the hesitating gunman in the shoulder, spinning him around. Then everything happened at once. Security flooded in from multiple entrances. More of Moretti's people materialized from positions throughout the ballroom. The 3 gunmen tried to fight their way out, but they were outmanned and outmaneuvered. Within 90 seconds, it was over. Moretti set Elena on her feet but kept one arm locked around her waist. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. People were crying, bleeding, frantically calling loved ones. The entire scene would be analyzed and dissected by every news outlet in the city within hours. And at the center of it all stood Luca Moretti with his arms around a nobody server, in full view of hundreds of witnesses and countless cameras. Elena's invisibility had just been murdered as thoroughly as if someone had put a bullet in it. Why? She whispered. Why did you do that? Moretti's hand tightened on her waist. Because 12 years ago, I made a promise to keep you alive, and I don't break my promises. Before Elena could process that impossible statement, he was moving again, steering her toward a side exit where a black SUV was already waiting. His security team formed a protective corridor, moving with the kind of precision that came from extensive training. Wait, I can't just leave. My job. Your job serving champagne to criminals and hypocrites. Moretti's tone was almost amused. Consider yourself promoted. To what? He helped her into the SUV with one hand while making rapid hand signals to his team with the other. The vehicle's engine was already running. Through the tinted windows, Elena could see police cars arriving, their lights painting the building in alternating red and blue. Moretti slid in beside her, and the SUV pulled away from the curb with smooth acceleration that suggested either excellent driving or complete disregard for traffic laws. Probably both. To what? Elena repeated, her voice harder now. Shock was giving way to anger, and anger was safer than the fear threatening to swallow her whole. Luca Moretti turned to face her fully, and in the dim interior of the moving vehicle, his expression was unreadable. "To my girlfriend," he said calmly. "At least, that's what everyone who saw us tonight will believe, including whoever sent those men to kill you." "I don't understand any of this." Elena pressed back against the leather seat, trying to maintain distance in the confined space. "I don't know you. I don't know why anyone would want to kill me. I'm nobody." "You stopped being nobody the moment you walked into that ballroom 12 years ago." Moretti's voice went quiet, almost gentle. "The night your father died. The night Victor Castellanos' organization was supposed to eliminate every witness to a transaction that never should have been seen." The world tilted sickeningly. Elena's hands had gone numb. What are you? "Your father was a forensic accountant, very good at his job, good enough to uncover a digital ledger that proved connections between 3 crime families, 24 politicians, and at least 15 federal agents." Moretti watched her face with uncomfortable intensity. He was also smart enough to copy that ledger before anyone realized what he'd found, and when they came for him, he hid it somewhere even I haven't been able to locate in 12 years of searching. "You're lying." But Elena's voice shook, because pieces of her fractured past were clicking into place with horrible clarity. The house in Connecticut, she barely remembered. Her father's study with its locked file cabinets and endless spreadsheets. The way her mother would get nervous when certain cars drove past their home. The night everything ended in blood and screaming. "I wish I was," Moretti said, "but the evidence is currently being scraped off the Plaza Astor's marble floors. Those men didn't come for a random server. They came for Elena Vasquez, the 12-year-old girl who disappeared the night her entire family was executed." Vasquez. Her real name, not the one the marshals had given her. Hearing it spoken aloud after so many years felt like a physical blow. The SUV navigated through Manhattan traffic with practiced ease. Elena realized they were heading toward the river, toward the high-rise district where penthouses sold for more money than most people earned in a lifetime. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded. "Somewhere safe." Moretti pulled out his phone and fired off several rapid texts. "My penthouse has better security than most federal buildings. You'll stay there until we figure out who's trying to kill you and why they've decided to make their move now, after 12 years of silence." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Elena reached for the door handle, though they were going 50 miles an hour and she had no actual plan beyond escape. "This is insane. You're insane. I don't care what you think you know about my past." Moretti's hand closed over hers, stopping her from opening the door. "Elena, look at me." Against her better judgment, she did. "I was there," he said quietly. "That night. I was 19 years old, newly promoted in my father's organization, sent to observe what was supposed to be a simple transaction. Your father was delivering evidence he'd agreed to bury in exchange for protection, but he brought a child, you, which was never part of the arrangement, and when the shooting started, I pulled you out of that house." The memory slammed into Elena with the force of a physical impact. She'd repressed so much of that night, locked it behind doors her conscious mind refused to open, but now fragments came bleeding through. The crack of gunfire, her mother's scream cut short, her father shoving something into her hands and telling her to run, and strong arms lifting her, carrying her away from the flames, a voice saying over and over, "Don't look back, don't look back." "You," she breathed. Moretti nodded. "I was supposed to let you die with the rest of them. My father gave explicit orders. But I was 19 and stupid, and had just watched 3 people get executed in their own home. So I called in a favor with someone in the U.S. Marshals Service and had you placed in witness protection instead." "Why?" Elena's voice cracked. "Why would you save me just to stalk me for 12 years? "I didn't stalk you. I kept track of you, made sure you were safe." His expression hardened. "And I searched for whatever your father hid, because that ledger is the only thing that can prove what really happened that night. And who gave the orders?" The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage, descending through multiple levels of security checkpoints. Elena's mind was spinning too fast to track everything, trying to reconcile the man sitting beside her with the monster she'd imagined for 12 years. "The men at the fundraiser," she said slowly. "How did they find me?" "That's what we need to determine." The vehicle stopped in a private parking area. Moretti's security team was already positioned around them. "Someone leaked your location, someone who knew what name you were using, where you worked, and that tonight would provide an opportunity to take you out in a way that looked random. Just another casualty of violence at a high-profile event." He opened his door and stepped out, then offered Elena his hand. She stared at it for a long moment, understanding that accepting it meant crossing a threshold she couldn't uncross. "What if I refuse?" she asked. "What if I get out of this car and walk away?" "Then you'll be dead within 24 hours. Moretti's tone held no satisfaction, only grim certainty. "The people hunting you have resources, connections, and most importantly, they know you're alive. That cat's out of the bag now. Your only chance of survival is staying close to someone who has the power and motivation to keep you breathing. And that's you?" "That's me." His hand remained steady, extended. "I made a promise 12 years ago. I don't break promises." Elena looked at his offered hand, at the tattoos she could see peeking out from beneath his cuff, dark ink against olive skin, at the security team waiting with professional patience, at the elevator that would carry her up to a gilded cage or a temporary sanctuary, depending on whether Moretti was telling the truth. She thought about the service corridor at the Plaza Astor, about 12 years of invisibility shredded in 5 minutes of chaos, about the fact that someone wanted her dead badly enough to risk a public shooting at one of Manhattan's most secure venues. And she thought about her father's face the last time she'd seen it, pressing something into her hands and telling her to be brave. Elena took Moretti's hand and let him pull her out of the vehicle. "Okay," she said, "but I want answers, all of them. And if I find out you're lying about any of this—" "You'll do what?" Moretti's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'm curious. I'll make you regret ever pulling me out of that house." For a moment, something flickered in his dark eyes. Respect, maybe, or amusement. Then he nodded. "Fair enough." He guided her toward the private elevator, his hand settling at the small of her back with the same possessive certainty he'd displayed at the fundraiser. "Come on, Elena Vasquez. Let's find out who wants you dead and why they waited 12 years to finish the job." The elevator door slid open with a quiet chime. Elena stepped inside, her reflection staring back from the mirrored walls, hair wild around her shoulders, still wearing her server's uniform, eyes too wide in a pale face. She looked nothing like the invisible girl who'd arrived at work that evening. She looked like someone who'd just had their entire world turned inside out. As the elevator began its ascent toward Moretti's penthouse, Elena closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. 12 years of running. 12 years of hiding. 12 years of telling herself that if she stayed small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, she could stay safe. All of it shattered in 5 minutes. The question now was whether Luca Moretti represented salvation or just another form of danger, and whether the truth he promised to reveal would set her free or bury her deeper in the past she'd spent 12 years trying to escape. The elevator climbed higher, carrying Elena toward answers she wasn't sure she wanted and a future she couldn't begin to predict. Behind her, in the Plaza Astor ballroom, crime scene investigators would be photographing evidence, interviewing witnesses, and reviewing security footage that showed a notorious Mafia boss publicly claiming a nobody server as his own. By morning, Elena Vasquez would be headline news, and somewhere in the shadows, the people who tried to kill her tonight would be planning their next move. The penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor, and stepping into it felt like entering a different world entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson River, the lights of New Jersey glittering like scattered jewels across the dark water. The interior was all clean lines and expensive materials, polished concrete, dark wood, leather furniture that looked both comfortable and prohibitively costly. Elena stopped just inside the entrance, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her rumpled server's uniform. Moretti moved past her with easy familiarity, shrugging out of his jacket and draping it over the back of a chair. "Kitchen's through there if you're hungry," he said, nodding toward an archway. "Bathroom's down the hall, second door on the right. My housekeeper keeps spare clothes in the guest bedroom, third door on the left. You're about her size." Elena stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the full weight of the evening was crashing down on her. "I need to call someone. My roommate. She'll be worried when I don't come home. Already handled, Moretti pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. A text conversation with someone named Sarah. Got called in for emergency family thing. We'll explain later. Don't wait up. Elena's stomach turned. You went through my phone? My security team did a basic sweep while we were in transit. Standard protocol. He pocketed the device without apparent guilt. Your roommate thinks you're dealing with a crisis. She won't expect to hear from you tonight. You can't just... Elena's voice rose, then cracked. You can't just take over my life like this. I have a job, responsibilities, people who will forget you existed within a week, Moretti interrupted, his tone not unkind but brutally honest. You were invisible, remember? That was the whole point. The only reason anyone will remember you now is because of what happened tonight. He was right, and that truth hurt worse than Elena wanted to admit. How many coworkers could pick her out of a lineup? How many people at the Plaza Astor had actually looked at her face before the shooting started? Only one. And he was currently pouring himself a drink from a crystal decanter, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Sit, Moretti said, gesturing to the leather sofa. We need to talk, and you look like you're about to fall over. Elena's legs were shaking, she realized. She made her way to the sofa and sank onto it, the leather cool against her skin. Through the windows, she could see the city spreading out in all directions, millions of lives being lived in blissful ignorance of the violence that had erupted tonight. Moretti settled into the chair across from her, close enough for conversation, but maintaining a careful distance. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing more of the tattoos she'd glimpsed earlier. A serpent wound around his left forearm, detailed and beautiful in a way that suggested expensive artistry. Start from the beginning, Elena said, forcing steel into her voice. You said you were there the night my family died. Tell me exactly what happened. Moretti took a slow sip of his drink, and for a moment she thought he might refuse. Then he set the glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your father was a forensic accountant, he began, brilliant with numbers, terrible at understanding the kind of people he was dealing with. He'd been hired by a shell company to audit some investment accounts. What he didn't know was that those accounts were how Victor Castellano's organization moved money between legitimate and illegitimate operations. The Castellano Foundation, Elena said quietly. The same one hosting tonight's fundraiser. Exactly. Victor's always been good at hiding in plain sight. Moretti's expression darkened. Your father found discrepancies, payments that didn't match up, transfers that made no sense from a legal standpoint, so he did what any good accountant would do. He dug deeper, and he found the ledger. Elena's hands twisted in her lap. What was in it? Everything. Every transaction, every bribe, every payoff between Castellano's people and officials who were supposed to be clean. Federal agents, judges, city councilmen, people in positions to make investigations disappear or evidence vanish. Moretti's voice went cold. It was proof of corruption running through every level of government and law enforcement. The kind of proof that could bring down empires. And my father copied it. Smartest thing he ever did, also the stupidest. Moretti picked up his glass again but didn't drink. He reached out through intermediary channels, said he had information worth protecting. A deal was arranged. He'd hand over the copy and promise to forget what he'd seen in exchange for immunity and protection for his family. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture Elena had been too young to understand 12 years ago. But something went wrong. Your father got nervous, started making demands, wanted guarantees in writing, wanted to involve the FBI. Moretti's jaw tightened. He didn't understand that the FBI couldn't be trusted, that some of the agents he wanted to talk to were the same ones taking money from Castellano. So they decided to kill him instead. They decided to eliminate the problem entirely. No witness, no testimony, no leverage. The ledger would become worthless without someone alive to authenticate it and testify about what it proved. Moretti finally took another drink. I was sent to observe. My father wanted me to learn how these things were handled. I was supposed to watch, stay silent, and come home with a better understanding of how our world worked. Elena's throat felt tight. But you didn't just watch. I watched your mother die first. Quick, professional. A bullet to the head before she could scream. Then your father, who tried to fight. Tried to buy time. Moretti's voice had gone flat, emotionless in the way people got when recounting trauma. He was shouting about files, about copies, about insurance policies. They didn't believe him. Or maybe they did and planned to search the house after everyone was dead. And me? Elena forced the words out. What about me? You were hiding in a closet upstairs. One of the shooters found you. He had orders to leave no witnesses. Moretti met her eyes directly. I shot him before he could pull the trigger. The room went very quiet. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, the distant sound of traffic far below, the hum of expensive climate control. You killed someone to save me, she said slowly. Someone from your own organization. I killed someone who was about to murder a 12-year-old child. Moretti's tone brooked no argument. There's a difference. My father didn't see it that way, but he wasn't there. He didn't see your face or hear you crying in that closet. He didn't have to make the choice in real time. Elena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man sitting across from her with the boy who'd made a split-second decision to value her life over loyalty. What happened after? I carried you out of the house while it burned. The shooters had set fires to destroy evidence. I told them you'd already been dealt with, that I'd confirm the body count later. Moretti's fingers tightened around his glass. Then I called a friend, someone who owed my family a favor and happened to work for the U.S. Marshal's Service. Had you placed in protective custody before anyone could ask questions. And my father's ledger? Vanished. We searched that house from foundation to rafters. Found nothing. Frustration bled into his voice. Your father hid it somewhere, but if he told anyone where, they died before they could talk. The marshals assumed it had been destroyed in the fire or never existed in the first place. Elena's mind raced, trying to remember that night through the lens of her adult understanding, her father's study. The way he'd pressed something into her hands, his face desperate and loving and terrified all at once. But the memory dissolved before she could grasp it fully, leaving only fragments and the taste of smoke. So for 12 years, you've been looking for this ledger, she said, and keeping tabs on me. I needed to make sure you stayed alive and invisible. As long as no one knew where you were, they had no reason to come after you. Moretti set his glass down with a soft click. But something changed. Someone figured out where you've been hiding, what name you're using, where you work. And that means someone has been watching you long enough to be certain you're Elena Vasquez and not just some random server who happens to look similar. The implication sent ice through Elena's veins. How long would that take? Weeks, maybe months. His expression went grim. Long enough to be sure. Long enough to plan tonight's attack. Which raises the question, how did they find you in the first place? The marshals have protocols. Your file would be sealed, restricted access, multiple layers of security. Moretti leaned back in his chair. For someone to identify you, they'd need either excellent facial recognition software running against databases they shouldn't have access to, or inside information from someone who knew where you were placed. A leak, Elena said, her voice hollow. In the Marshal's Service. That's my working theory. Someone with access to witness protection files, probably someone who's been on Castellano's payroll for years, waiting for the right opportunity. Moretti pulled out his phone and began scrolling through something. The question is whether they acted independently or were told to start looking. What's the difference? If they acted independently, it means someone just got greedy or paranoid and decided to tie up loose ends after 12 years. If they were told to start looking, it means something's changed in the last few months. Something that made your existence relevant again. Elena rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. Like what? Like someone preparing to make a move against Castellano, or federal investigations getting too close to people who can't afford the scrutiny, or... Moretti paused, his expression shifting into something calculating. Someone finding evidence that the ledger might still exist after all. But you said you searched. You said it was gone. I said we searched your house. That doesn't mean your father didn't hide it somewhere else. Moretti stood and began pacing, the movement controlled but restless. He was smart enough to copy it in the first place. Smart enough to realize he needed insurance. Maybe smart enough to create a dead man's switch. A what? A failsafe. Information set to be released automatically if something happened to him. Moretti turned to face her. Did your father ever talk to you about important documents? Safety deposit boxes? Places that were special to your family? Elena tried to think back through 12 years and the deliberate amnesia she'd wrapped around that period of her life. I was 12. He didn't exactly discuss his security protocols with me, but he might have hidden something in plain sight, something a child would remember, but adults would overlook. Moretti's intensity was almost physical. A favorite place, a special object, something he gave you or told you to keep safe. He told me to run, Elena interrupted, her voice sharp. That's all I remember. Running and someone's arms grabbing me, and then nothing until I woke up in a strange room with federal agents asking me questions I couldn't answer. Moretti stopped pacing. You don't remember me carrying you out? I remember someone carrying me. I didn't know it was you until tonight. Elena stood as well, suddenly needing to move, to do something other than sit and absorb revelations. For 12 years I've had nightmares about that night. For 12 years I've been terrified of shadows and sudden noises and men in dark suits. And now you're telling me it was all connected to some ledger my father hid, and people are still trying to kill me because of it? Yes. Moretti's bluntness was almost refreshing. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Then find it yourself. The words burst out of Elena with more force than she'd intended. You're the one who wants it so badly. You're the one with resources and connections. I just want to be left alone. You can't be left alone anymore. That option died the moment those gunmen walked into the Plaza Astor. Moretti crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, not touching her but close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Like it or not, you're part of this now. The only question is whether you're going to be a victim or a player. I never wanted to be either, Elena said, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. No one ever does. But life doesn't care what we want. His voice gentled slightly. I know you're scared. I know this is overwhelming, but you're stronger than you think, Elena. You survived 12 years in hiding. You built a new life from nothing. You've got more steel in you than most people I know. Steel, Elena repeated bitterly. I was invisible. Invisibility is a survival skill, so is knowing when to stop hiding and start fighting. Moretti stepped back, giving her space. I'm not going to force you to do anything, but I'm going to keep you alive, whether you cooperate or not. That's non-negotiable. Elena wanted to argue, to push back against his certainty and his plans and his casual assumption of control over her life. But she was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, and standing in a stranger's penthouse wearing a server's uniform while the city glittered 42 floors below. I need to shower, she said finally, and sleep, and figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. Guest room's ready, door locks from the inside if it makes you feel safer. Moretti moved toward his desk, already pulling out a laptop. We'll talk more in the morning, figure out next steps. Elena headed toward the hallway, then paused at the threshold. Why did you really save me that night? The truth. Moretti looked up from his screen, and for a moment something raw showed in his expression before he locked it away. Because I'd already watched 2 people die in front of me, and I couldn't stomach a third. Especially not a child who looked at me like I was her last hope in the world. And that was enough? To risk everything? At 19, I still believed some lines shouldn't be crossed, no matter what business you're in. His smile was bitter. I was naive. Are you still? Elena asked. Naive? About most things, no. But about keeping you alive? Moretti's eyes met hers with unwavering directness. I'm naive enough to think it matters. Naive enough to believe that saving you 12 years ago was one of the few decent things I've ever done. And naive enough to want to keep that one good deed from being erased. Elena nodded slowly, processing this. Then she turned and walked down the hallway, counting doors until she found the guest bedroom. It was smaller than the main living space, but still luxurious by any standard she'd known. A queen bed with expensive linens, a window overlooking the river, an ensuite bathroom with marble counters, and a shower that looked like it belonged in a spa. She locked the door as Moretti had suggested, then stood for a long moment just breathing. 12 years of running. 12 years of being nobody. And in 5 minutes, it had all been stripped away like tissue paper. The shower was hot enough to hurt, but Elena stood under it anyway, washing away the smell of champagne and gunpowder in fear. She found clothes in the closet as promised, yoga pants and a soft t-shirt that fit reasonably well. Her reflection in the mirror showed someone she barely recognized. Dark hair loose around bare shoulders, eyes haunted by memories she could no longer suppress. Elena Vasquez stared back at her. Not Elena Vance, the invisible server. Not Jennifer Morrison or Katie Walsh or any of the other names the marshals had given her over the years. Elena Vasquez, daughter of murdered parents, keeper of secrets she didn't remember, survivor of a massacre orchestrated by men who apparently still wanted her dead. She climbed into the bed and pulled the covers up, half expecting that sleep would be impossible, but exhaustion dragged her down within minutes, pulling her into dreams of fire and running footsteps and strong arms carrying her away from everything she'd known. When Elena woke, early morning light was streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee was drifting down the hallway. She found her way to the kitchen on instinct, following the scent like a lifeline. Moretti stood at the counter, dressed in dark jeans and a black t-shirt, looking significantly less polished than he had in his suit the night before. Somehow, this version was more dangerous, all lean muscle and casual confidence, the tattoos on his arms fully visible now. He glanced up when she entered. "Coffee's fresh. Eggs if you want them." "Just coffee," Elena said, helping herself to a mug. The normalcy of the moment felt surreal given everything that had happened. "Sleep?" "Better than expected." She leaned against the counter, cradling the warm mug. "What happens now?" Moretti's phone buzzed before he could answer. He checked it, and his expression went cold. "Turn on the TV channel 7. Elena found the remote and clicked on the flat screen mounted to the wall. The morning news filled the screen, showing footage from the Plaza Astor. Yellow crime scene tape, reporters speaking in serious tones, and then her own face captured from security camera footage. Moretti's arms around her, his hand in her hair, their bodies pressed together in what looked unmistakably like a passionate embrace. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Mafia boss's mystery woman identified as server, Elena Vance." "They have my name," Elena breathed. "They have the name you've been using," Moretti corrected, "which means whoever leaked your location to the gunmen also leaked it to the press. They want you visible. They want everyone looking for you." "Why?" "Because visible targets are easier to hit, or—" He paused, studying the screen with narrowed eyes. "Because they want me to know they found you. They want me to understand they can reach you whenever they want." "This is about you," Elena realized. "The attack, the publicity. It's not just about killing me. It's about sending you a message. Welcome to my world. Everything's a message, a power play, a negotiation conducted through violence and intimidation." Moretti switched off the TV with a sharp gesture. "The good news is that now everyone thinks you're under my protection. It makes you significantly harder to kill. The bad news is you're caught in the middle of something bigger than either of us." Elena set down her coffee mug before she could drop it. "What aren't you telling me?" Moretti was quiet for a long moment, making some internal calculation. Then he sighed. "There's been tension building for months between the old guard, people like Castellano who've run things their way for decades, and newer players who think the traditional methods are outdated. Businesses that should be transitioning to legitimate operations, territories that should be renegotiated, deals that should be honored but are being ignored." "And you're caught in the middle," Elena guessed. "I'm trying to modernize, move my family's operations toward legitimate enterprises, cut ties with the worst of the old corruption." His laugh was hollow. "Turns out people who've made billions from illegal activities aren't thrilled about going straight. So they're pushing back. They're preparing for war. Small conflicts so far, territory disputes, shipments going missing, people changing allegiances. But it's escalating." Moretti met her eyes. "And if someone were to find evidence of corruption that could bring down people on both sides of this conflict, it would shift the entire balance of power." Understanding dawned cold and clear. The ledger. The ledger. Which is why after 12 years of lying dormant, it suddenly matters again. Moretti poured himself more coffee. "If I had that evidence, I could use it to force the old guard into retirement or prison. If Castellano had it, he could ensure his competitors went down while he stayed untouchable. Whoever controls that information controls the future of organized crime in this city. And I'm the key to finding it. You're the only person who was present when your father hit it, the only survivor who might remember something useful." He studied her over the rim of his mug. "Which makes you the most valuable and most dangerous person in New York right now." Elena's hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against the counter. "I don't remember anything. I've tried. For 12 years I've had therapists and victim advocates and federal agents asking me questions, and I don't remember. Because you were traumatized. Because your brain protected you by burying the memories." Moretti set down his coffee. "But trauma doesn't erase memory permanently. It locks it away. Sometimes the right trigger can bring it back." "What kind of trigger?" That's what we need to figure out. He pulled out his phone and showed her a list of addresses. These are places your family lived, worked, frequented in the months before the attack. I'm proposing we visit them, see if anything jogs your memory. Elena stared at the list, her chest tightening. You want me to go back, to relive all of it. I want you to survive. If that means confronting your past, then yes. His voice was firm, but not unkind. You can't run anymore, Elena. The only way out is through. She wanted to argue, to refuse, to demand he find some other solution that didn't require her to tear open wounds she'd spent 12 years trying to heal. But looking at his face, at the determination there and the strange protectiveness that had driven him to save her twice now, she knew he was right. Invisibility was no longer an option. Running would only get her killed. The only path forward was into the past she'd been avoiding. Okay, Elena said quietly. Where do we start? Moretti's expression shifted, something like approval crossing his features. Your old house. The one that burned. The lot's still empty. No one wanted to build where a family died. Maybe seeing it again will trigger something. When? Today. Now. The longer we wait, the more time we give our enemies to make their next move. He was already moving toward the door, grabbing a jacket. There are clothes in the guest room closet that should fit you better. Get changed. We leave in 10 minutes. Elena nodded and headed back to the bedroom, her heart pounding. She pulled on jeans and a sweater from the closet, both clearly expensive and fitting her better than they had any right to. In the mirror, she looked like someone else entirely, not the invisible server or the terrified child, but someone caught between identities, between past and future. She met Moretti at the elevator, and they descended in silence broken only by the soft mechanical hum of cables. His security team was waiting in the garage, the same hard-faced men from last night, plus a woman with watchful eyes and a gun visible at her hip. Marco will drive, Moretti said, gesturing to a man who looked like he could bench press a car. Sophia rides shotgun. We'll take 2 additional vehicles for security. Is all this really necessary? Elena asked. After last night? Yes. Moretti helped her into the SUV's back seat. Until we know who's behind the attacks and what their next move is, we treat every outing as a potential ambush. The convoy pulled out of the garage and into Manhattan traffic. Elena watched the city pass by through tinted windows, feeling disconnected from the normal people going about their normal lives. Had she ever been one of them? Or had she always been marked, always been hunted, just too naive to realize it? The drive to Connecticut took over an hour, long enough for Elena's anxiety to build from a simmer to a roar. Moretti worked on his laptop beside her, fielding calls and messages with quiet efficiency. Occasionally he would glance her way, checking without words if she was okay. She wasn't okay, but she was here, which was something. They turned off the highway onto increasingly familiar roads. Elena's hands clenched in her lap as recognition hit. She'd walked these streets as a child, ridden her bike past these houses, lived a normal life that seemed impossibly distant now. It's the next left, she said quietly, the words coming from some buried place in her memory. Moretti looked at her sharply. You remember? I remember the route home from school. I remember the big oak tree on the corner and the blue house with the garden. Elena's voice was distant, almost dreamlike. I remember being happy here. The SUV turned onto Maple Street, and Elena's breath caught. The neighborhood looked smaller than she remembered, the houses closer together, everything slightly shabby in the way of places that had aged without her. And there, halfway down the block, was the empty lot where her childhood had ended. Stop here, Moretti instructed Marco. The vehicle pulled to the curb, and the 2 security SUVs flanking them did the same. Elena stared at the vacant space, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The lot was overgrown with weeds, the foundation barely visible through years of neglect. But she could see the outline of where the house had stood, could almost see the ghost of it superimposed over the emptiness. I can't, she whispered. Moretti's hand found hers, warm and solid. Yes, you can. You're stronger than you know. Elena looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of his tattooed skin against her pale fingers. Then she looked back at the lot, at the place where everything had been taken from her, and she opened the car door and stepped out into her past. The air smelled different than Elena remembered, less like honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass, more like decay and neglect. She stood at the edge of the overgrown lot, her feet refusing to carry her any closer to the cracked foundation that was all that remained of her childhood home. Moretti stepped up beside her, close enough that his presence was tangible but not crowding. His security team fanned out around the perimeter, their vigilance obvious even as they tried to appear casual. "Take your time," he said quietly. Elena forced herself to move forward, her shoes crushing weeds that had grown waist-high in 12 years of abandonment. Each step felt like walking through water, resistance building with every inch of ground she covered. When she reached what would have been the front porch, she stopped. The door was blue, she heard herself say. "My mother painted it the summer before everything happened. She said every home should have a cheerful entrance. What else do you remember?" Elena closed her eyes, and the memories came flooding back with unexpected clarity. There was a swing on the porch. My father would sit there in the evenings, reading the newspaper. I'd bring him lemonade, and he'd let me sit beside him while he explained the stock market or showed me how to read financial reports. He was teaching you his work. I thought it was boring at the time, numbers and charts and corporations I didn't care about. Elena's voice cracked. I'd give anything to have one more boring evening on that porch. She opened her eyes and looked at the empty space where the house had stood. The foundation formed a rough rectangle, cracked concrete marking the outline of rooms she could still see in her mind's eye. The living room where her mother had kept fresh flowers every week. The kitchen where they'd eaten dinner as a family every night at 6:30. The hallway leading to her bedroom, decorated with posters of pop stars and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. "Where was your father's study?" Moretti asked, his tone carefully neutral. Elena pointed to the far left corner of the foundation. "Back there. He kept it locked when he wasn't working, said it was boring adult stuff and I'd just fall asleep if I tried to read his files. But you went in sometimes anyway." It wasn't a question. Elena found herself smiling despite the heaviness in her chest. "Once. I was looking for birthday present money. I'd seen him hide cash in his desk drawer. Instead, I found a chocolate bar he'd been saving and ate it before he could stop me. He pretended to be mad, but I could tell he wasn't really." "What else was in the study?" "Filing cabinets, lots of them. His computer, this huge desktop that took forever to start up, shelves with books about accounting and tax law." Elena walked carefully across the foundation, following the ghost of floorboards that no longer existed. "And a safe, behind a painting of a sailboat. I only knew about it because I saw him opening it once." Moretti's attention sharpened. "A safe. Did he keep the ledger there?" "I don't know. I never saw inside it." Elena knelt where the study would have been, her fingers brushing the cracked concrete. Ash and debris had been cleared away years ago, but she could still feel the weight of what had been lost here. "The night everything happened, he called me into the study. I remember being annoyed because I was watching a movie." "What did he say?" Elena's breath hitched as the memory surfaced, sharp and painful. "He was scared. I could see it in his eyes even though he was trying to smile. He said..." She paused, forcing herself to recall the exact words. "He said, 'Baby girl, I need you to remember something important. If anything ever happens to me, the music box is the key, the one your grandmother gave you. Don't let anyone take it away.'" "A music box?" Moretti crouched beside her. "Do you still have it?" "I don't know. I don't remember what happened to any of my things after that night. The marshals packed up whatever they could salvage and put it in storage somewhere." Elena pressed her palms against the concrete, as if she could somehow reach through time to that moment. "I didn't understand what he meant. I thought he was just being sentimental about family heirlooms." "But he was telling you where he hid the ledger." "Maybe. Or maybe he was just a scared man trying to tell his daughter he loved her in case he didn't get another chance." Elena stood abruptly, unable to bear the weight of kneeling where her father had died. "I was 12, Luca. I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't know I should be memorizing everything he said." "You were a child. You weren't supposed to know." His voice held no judgment, only a quiet understanding that somehow made it worse. "But now you're remembering. That's what matters." Elena walked the perimeter of the foundation, her mind churning through fragments of that last night. Her father's study, the fear in his eyes. The music box he'd mentioned, which had been a gift from her grandmother who died when Elena was 8. It had played Claire de Lune and had a tiny ballerina that spun when you opened the lid. "I haven't thought about that music box in years," she said. "It seemed like such a random thing for him to mention when everything was falling apart around us." "That's exactly why he mentioned it, because it would seem random. because no one looking for hidden evidence would pay attention to a child's toy. Moretti's phone buzzed, and he checked it briefly. If your father was smart enough to copy the ledger, he was smart enough to hide it somewhere the people hunting him wouldn't think to look. But where would the music box be now? Everything I owned was either destroyed in the fire or taken by the marshals. The marshals would have cataloged your belongings. There'll be a record. Moretti made a call, speaking in rapid Italian to someone on the other end. When he hung up, his expression was determined. I have people who can access those records. Find out what happened to items from your childhood. It'll take a few hours. Elena turned in a slow circle, taking in the overgrown lot and the neighborhood beyond. A woman was walking a dog down the sidewalk, glancing curiously at the security team and expensive vehicles. 2 houses down, someone was mowing their lawn, life continuing as if this spot wasn't soaked in blood and tragedy. Do you remember anything else from that night? Moretti asked. Anything your father said or did? Anywhere he might have gone in the days before? Elena forced herself to think past the panic and terror that dominated her memories. He'd been working late a lot, coming home after I was already in bed. But a few days before it happened, he took me somewhere. A church, I think. Or maybe a chapel. Which church? I don't remember the name. It was old, made of stone right next to a river. Elena rubbed her temples, trying to pull more details from the fog of time. There was a statue outside, a saint or an angel, I couldn't tell which. My father went inside for a while and told me to wait in the car. When he came back, he seemed relieved, less stressed than he'd been. Moretti's eyes narrowed. He might have hidden something there. A backup copy, insurance in case the primary hiding spot was compromised. Or he might have just been praying for protection he never got. Elena's voice was bitter. Not everything has to be a conspiracy, Luca. In my world, everything is a conspiracy until proven otherwise. He gestured to Marco, who jogged over immediately. They spoke in low voices, Moretti giving instructions that Elena couldn't quite hear. Then Marco nodded and returned to the vehicles, already on his phone. What are you doing? Elena asked. Having my people find every church and chapel within a 50-mile radius that matches your description. We'll visit them all if we have to. Moretti's hand found the small of her back, guiding her gently away from the foundation. But first, I think you've had enough memory lane for one morning. Let's get you somewhere you can breathe. Elena didn't argue. The lot was pressing in on her, heavy with ghosts and grief. She let Moretti lead her back to the SUV, let herself be settled into the leather seat, let the door close between her and the place where her family had died. As they pulled away from Maple Street, Elena looked back one last time. The empty lot grew smaller in the rear window, weeds swaying in the breeze, the cracked foundation already disappearing from view. She'd thought coming here would provide closure, some sense of understanding. Instead, she just felt raw and exposed, like a wound that had been healing wrong for 12 years and now had to be reopened to set properly. There's a diner about 10 minutes from here, Moretti said, his voice breaking through her spiraling thoughts. Good coffee, better pancakes. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since last night's fundraiser, which was interrupted by gunfire. You need to eat. His tone left no room for argument. The diner was exactly what Elena needed without knowing she needed it. A slice of Americano with red vinyl booths, a jukebox in the corner, and waitresses who looked like they'd been working there since the 70s. Moretti's security team took positions around the perimeter while he guided Elena to a booth in the back corner with sightlines to both exits. A waitress with frosted hair and kind eyes appeared with menus. What can I get you folks? Coffee, black, Moretti said, and whatever she wants. Elena scanned the menu without really seeing it. Pancakes and orange juice. When the waitress left, Moretti leaned back in the booth and studied Elena with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. Talk to me. What are you thinking? That this is insane, that I spent 12 years trying to forget, and now I'm supposed to remember everything perfectly enough to find evidence that might not even exist anymore. Elena wrapped her hands around the water glass the waitress had left, needing something to hold on to. What if we never find the ledger? What if it burned in the fire, or my father destroyed it, or it's buried somewhere we'll never think to look? Then we figure out another way to keep you alive. Moretti's certainty was unshakable. The ledger would make things easier, but it's not the only option. I have resources, connections, people who owe me favors. We'll find a solution. Why do you even care? The question came out sharper than Elena intended. I'm nobody to you, some kid you saved once because you had a momentary crisis of conscience. You could dump me somewhere with money and a new identity and never think about me again. Is that what you think I should do? I think it would be a lot simpler than dragging me around to crime scenes and abandoned houses. Elena met his eyes across the table. I think you've already done more than anyone could expect. You don't owe me anything else. The waitress returned with their drinks before Moretti could respond. Elena doctored her coffee with cream and sugar, needing something to do with her hands. When they were alone again, Moretti leaned forward. 12 years ago, I made a choice, he said quietly. I decided your life was worth more than my family's approval or my position in the organization. I took a risk that could have gotten me killed. And for 12 years, I've lived with the knowledge that I'm the reason you're still breathing. I never asked you to carry that responsibility. You didn't have to. I chose it. His fingers drummed once against the table, the only sign of tension in his otherwise controlled demeanor. Do you know what my father said when he found out what I'd done? He said I was weak, sentimental, that I'd let emotion compromise the family's interests. He wanted me to fix my mistake, find you and finish what the others had started. Elena's blood went cold. But you didn't. I told him you'd died in the fire, showed him fake documentation, a death certificate I had forged, convinced him the problem was solved. Moretti's smile was grim. He believed me because he wanted to, because admitting I defied him was worse than accepting a convenient lie. So you've been lying to your own family for 12 years, protecting me from them. Protecting you from everyone. The people who killed your parents, the federal agents who were compromised, my own organization. His eyes held hers. You're not nobody to me, Elena. You're proof that I'm capable of doing the right thing even when it costs me everything. You're the one choice I made that I've never regretted. The waitress arrived with Elena's pancakes before she could formulate a response. She stared at the stack drowning in syrup, her appetite completely gone. Moretti watched her not eat with patient amusement. 3 bites minimum, he said. Or I'm telling Marco you're not taking care of yourself and he'll start preparing nutritional smoothies. Despite everything, Elena found herself smiling. That's a threat? You haven't tasted Marco's smoothies. He puts kale in everything. Moretti sipped his coffee. 3 bites. I'll wait. Elena ate mechanically, tasting nothing, but managing to get food down. Moretti seemed satisfied and turned his attention to his own phone, reading messages and responding with quick efficiency. The normalcy of sitting in a diner, eating breakfast, watching someone check their email, it felt surreal given the circumstances. So what happens now? Elena asked finally. We wait for your people to find the music box and the chapel? We wait. And while we wait, you stay close to me. No going off alone, no taking unnecessary risks. Moretti's expression hardened. Whoever tried to kill you at the fundraiser is going to try again. They have to, now that you're publicly connected to me. Leaving you alive sends a message that I can't be touched, that I'm strong enough to protect what's mine. I'm not yours, Elena said automatically. The entire city thinks you are. That's what matters. He pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. The headline read, Moretti's Mystery Woman. Who is Elena Vance? Below it was a composite of information someone had compiled in less than 24 hours. Her employment history, her apartment building, even a photo from her driver's license. Elena's stomach turned. They know where I live. Lived. You're not going back there. Moretti scrolled through more articles, each one dissecting her life with invasive thoroughness. By this afternoon, every detail of Elena Vance's existence will be public knowledge. Where you bank, what you buy, who you know. The media's already camped outside your apartment building, and your roommate has been offered money for interviews. Sarah wouldn't. Everyone has a price. Or a breaking point. Moretti's tone was matter-of-fact. I'm not saying she'll sell you out, but the pressure she's under right now is immense. Reporters, investigators, probably people claiming to be your long-lost relatives looking for a payout. Your old life is being picked apart in real time. Elena set down her fork. Appetite completely vanished. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that everything I built for myself is gone? You accept that Elena Vance was always temporary. She was a holding pattern, a way to stay invisible until the past caught up with you. Moretti's voice gentled. Now it has. Now you have a choice about who you become next. And who's that? That's up to you. But whoever she is, she can't be invisible anymore. He finished his coffee and signaled for the check. You're going to have to decide what kind of power you want. The kind that comes from hiding, or the kind that comes from standing in the light and daring anyone to touch you. The waitress brought the check, and Moretti paid in cash, leaving a tip that made her eyes widen. As they stood to leave, Elena caught sight of her reflection in the diner's window. She looked tired, scared, younger than her 24 years. Not at all like someone capable of the kind of power Moretti was describing. They walked back to the SUV in silence. Marco held the door for Elena, his expression professionally blank, but she caught the way his eyes scanned the parking lot, the street, the roof lines of nearby buildings, looking for threats, always looking. Where to now? She asked as they pulled back onto the main road. Back to the city. I have a meeting this afternoon that can't be postponed. Moretti was already scrolling through messages again. You'll stay at the penthouse with Sophia. She's former military, excellent at her job, and under strict instructions to keep you alive and comfortable. A babysitter. A bodyguard. There's a difference. His phone rang and he answered it, speaking rapid Italian again. The conversation sounded tense. His responses clipped and controlled. Elena turned her attention to the window, watching Connecticut roll past. They'd be back in Manhattan within the hour, back to Moretti's world of security teams and penthouse apartments, and casual violence masquerading as business negotiations. She felt unmoored, caught between the life she'd lost and the life she'd built, and this new existence being forced upon her. Moretti finished his call and immediately placed another one, this time in English. I need everything you can find on a music box. Antique, probably French or Swiss, plays Clair de Lune. It would have been catalogued with Elena Vasquez's belongings after a house fire in Connecticut 12 years ago. He listened for a moment. I don't care if you have to bribe every clerk in the marshal's service. Find it. He hung up and met Elena's questioning look. My people work fast when properly motivated. We'll know where that music box ended up by tonight. And if it was destroyed? If there's nothing to find? Then we move to Plan B, the chapel you mentioned. If your father hid backup evidence somewhere, a church would make sense. Sacred ground, respected institutions, places that keep records and honor confidentiality. Moretti's fingers tapped against his knee, a rare show of restless energy. He was smart, your father, smarter than the people who killed him gave him credit for. Elena absorbed this, trying to see her father through Moretti's eyes. Not just the dad who'd taught her about compound interest and made terrible jokes at dinner, but a man who'd uncovered corruption and tried to use it as leverage for his family's safety. A man who'd been brave or foolish enough to think he could negotiate with criminals and win. Do you think he knew, she asked quietly, that they were going to kill him anyway, no matter what deal he made? Moretti was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. I think he knew the risk, and I think he gambled everything on being smart enough to outmaneuver them. He almost succeeded. Almost isn't enough. No, but almost is what gave you a chance to survive. Almost is what let him hide evidence that might still change everything. Moretti's hand found hers again, warm and solid. Your father loved you enough to die protecting you. The least we can do is honor that by finishing what he started. Elena squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from the contact. Outside, the landscape was shifting from suburban sprawl to urban density as they approached Manhattan. The skyline rose in the distance, familiar and foreign all at once. Her phone, the one Marco had returned to her that morning, buzzed with incoming messages. Dozens of them, from numbers she didn't recognize. Texts from supposed friends she'd never heard of, reporters requesting interviews, people claiming to have information about her past. She turned the phone off and shoved it in her pocket. They'll keep trying, Moretti warned. Everyone wants a piece of the story. Everyone thinks they can get close to you and through you, to me. I won't talk to anyone. Good. Because the second you do, you give them ammunition. Every word you say will be analyzed, twisted, used against both of us. He shifted in his seat to face her more directly. I know this is overwhelming. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But you need to understand that perception is reality in my world. If people perceive you as weak or vulnerable, you become a target. If they perceive you as mine, as protected, as dangerous to threaten, you become untouchable. So I'm supposed to, what? Pretend to be your girlfriend for real? You're supposed to let people believe whatever keeps you safest. If that means they think we're together, so be it. His expression was unreadable. unless the idea of being associated with me is too repulsive. Elena studied his face, trying to find the 19-year-old boy who'd saved a child despite orders to let her die. He was still in there somewhere, buried beneath years of violence and hard choices, but he wasn't the person people saw when they looked at Luca Moretti. They saw the tattoos and the controlled danger and the name that made headlines. They didn't see the man who'd spent 12 years protecting someone he barely knew because it was the right thing to do. "It's not repulsive," Elena said quietly. "It's just complicated. Everything worth doing is." The corner of his mouth lifted in something almost like a smile. "We'll figure it out as we go." They lapsed into silence for the remainder of the drive. Elena watched the city grow closer, watched the traffic thicken and the buildings press in on all sides. By the time they reached Moretti's building and descended into the secure parking garage, her nerves were stretched tight. Sophia was waiting by the elevator, her professional demeanor radiating competence. "Everything's secure upstairs. I've done a full sweep and updated the perimeter protocols." "Good." Moretti turned to Elena. "I'll be back by evening. Sophia has instructions to shoot first and ask questions later if anyone tries to breach security." "Comforting," Elena said dryly. "It should be. Sophia's never missed." He squeezed her shoulder briefly, the gesture almost affectionate. "Stay safe. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll call if there are any updates on the music box or the chapel." Then he was gone, striding toward a different vehicle where more of his security team waited. Elena watched him go, feeling strangely bereft. Which was ridiculous. She'd known the man for less than 24 hours. The fact that she already felt safer in his presence than she had in years was probably some kind of trauma response. "Ready to head up?" Sophia asked, her tone professional but not unkind. Elena nodded and followed her into the elevator. As they ascended toward the penthouse, she caught Sophia watching her in the elevator's mirrored walls. "You can ask," Elena said. "Whatever you're wondering." "I was just thinking you're holding up better than most people would in your situation." Sophia's expression remained neutral. "Most civilians would be falling apart by now." "Who says I'm not falling apart on the inside?" "The fact that you're still functional, still thinking clearly enough to be cautious." The elevator doors opened and Sophia stepped out first, doing a quick visual sweep before gesturing for Elena to follow. "Luca doesn't bring people here often. The fact that he's protecting you this openly means he considers you important, or a useful tool for finding something he wants," Elena countered. Sophia's smile was knowing. "If that's what you need to tell yourself. But I've worked for Luca for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at a useful tool the way he looks at you." Before Elena could formulate a response, Sophia was already moving through the penthouse, checking windows and sight lines with practiced efficiency. Elena stood in the entryway surrounded by expensive furniture and river views, feeling like an intruder in someone else's life. Her life. This was her life now, at least temporarily. No apartment to return to, no job to go back to, no carefully maintained invisibility to hide behind. Just this strange new existence where she was both protected and trapped, valuable and vulnerable, connected to a man whose world operated by rules she didn't understand. Elena walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out over the city. Somewhere down there, people were looking for her, planning how to kill her, analyzing her past and dissecting her present. And somewhere in that same city, hidden in a music box or buried in a chapel or lost in the ashes of her childhood home, was evidence that could change everything. "I need you to help me with something," Elena said, turning to face Sophia. "I need to learn how to defend myself. How to shoot, how to fight, how to survive if someone gets past all this security." Sophia's expression shifted into something like respect. "That's smart thinking. I can teach you the basics." "Not basics. I need to be dangerous." Elena's voice was steady, certain. "I've spent 12 years being prey. I'm done running. If people are going to hunt me, I want them to know they might not survive the attempt." Sophia studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, we'll start tomorrow morning. But fair warning, learning to be dangerous isn't the same as being willing to use that danger when it matters. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Elena thought about the Plaza Astor ballroom, about the empty lot where her family had died, about 12 years of living in fear, always looking over her shoulder, never feeling safe. She thought about her father's last words and the music box she barely remembered, and the possibility that she held the key to bringing down the people who'd destroyed her life. "I'm ready," she said. And for the first time in 12 years, she actually meant it. Sophia proved to be a relentless teacher. The next morning, she had Elena up before dawn, dressed in workout clothes, standing in what turned out to be a private gym hidden behind a door Elena had assumed led to storage. "First rule," Sophia said, circling Elena like a predator assessing prey. "Your size is a disadvantage in a physical fight, so you don't fight fair. You fight to survive, which means you fight dirty." For the next 2 hours, Sophia drilled Elena on pressure points, vulnerable spots, ways to use an attacker's momentum against them. By the time they finished, Elena was drenched in sweat, and every muscle screamed in protest, but she'd successfully thrown Sophia twice and landed a kick that made the other woman nod in approval. "You're a quick learner," Sophia said, tossing Elena a water bottle. "Most people hesitate when I tell them to go for the eyes or throat. You don't. Hesitation gets you killed." Elena drank deeply, her heart still racing from exertion. At least that's what 12 years of looking over my shoulder taught me. "Good instinct. We'll build on it." Sophia glanced at her watch. "Luca should be back within the hour. He called earlier, said his people found something." Elena's pulse kicked up for a different reason. "The music box?" "He didn't say. Just that you'd want to hear it in person." Sophia headed toward the door. "Get cleaned up. I'll make breakfast." Elena showered quickly, her mind racing through possibilities. Had they found the music box? The chapel? Some other piece of the puzzle her father had left behind? She dressed in jeans and a soft sweater from the seemingly endless supply of clothes that had appeared in the guest room closet, then made her way to the kitchen where Sophia was efficiently preparing eggs and toast. They ate in companionable silence, Sophia checking her phone periodically while Elena tried not to watch the clock. When the private elevator chimed, announcing Moretti's arrival, Elena's entire body tensed with anticipation. He strode in looking tired but satisfied, his suit jacket gone and his sleeves rolled up. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, suggesting he'd been up most of the night. But when he saw Elena, something in his expression softened. "We found it," he said without preamble. "The music box. It was in a storage facility in White Plains, part of the items the marshals cataloged after the fire. They kept everything in case you ever aged out of the program and wanted your family's belongings." Elena's breath caught. "Do you have it?" "It's being delivered within the hour. My people had to pull some strings to get it released, but—" He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. The image showed a delicate wooden box, ornately carved with roses and vines, slightly scorched on one side but otherwise intact. Elena's vision blurred with sudden tears. She remembered that box. Remembered her grandmother's gnarled hands placing it in her lap on her 8th birthday. Remembered the tinkling melody of Claire de Lune. Remembered the tiny ballerina spinning endlessly in front of a miniature mirror. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the one my father mentioned." Moretti's expression was unreadable. "Then we wait for delivery and find out what he hid inside." The next 45 minutes stretched into eternity. Elena paced the living room while Moretti made calls and Sophia maintained her post by the windows. When the elevator finally chimed again, Marco stepped out carrying a small box wrapped in protective padding. He set it on the coffee table with surprising gentleness, then stepped back. Moretti nodded his dismissal, and Marco left without a word, taking Sophia with him. Suddenly, Elena and Moretti were alone with a piece of her past, and the silence felt heavy with expectation. "Do you want me to open it?" Moretti asked quietly. Elena shook her head. This was hers, her history, her father's legacy, her responsibility. She knelt beside the coffee table and carefully unwrapped the padding. The music box emerged exactly as she remembered. The carved roses still beautiful despite the scorch marks, the wood still smooth beneath her fingers. Her hand shook as she lifted the lid. The mechanism engaged with a soft click, and Claire de Lune began to play. Tinny and slightly off-key, but achingly familiar. The tiny ballerina spun on her platform, her painted face serene, her tutu still pristine white. But something was different. The interior of the box, which should have been simple wood lined with velvet, had a false bottom. Elena could see the seam now, carefully hidden but visible once you knew to look for it. "There," Moretti said, pointing. "Press on the ballerina's platform." Elena did, and heard a soft click. The false bottom released, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a small flash drive wrapped in plastic, and beneath that, a folded piece of paper. Elena's fingers trembled as she pulled out the paper first. Her father's handwriting covered it, the ink slightly smudged but still legible. She had to blink away tears to read the words. "My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, then I didn't find a way out." "I'm sorry, baby girl," I'm so sorry for the danger I brought to our door, for the choices I made that put you and your mother at risk. I thought I could be smart enough, careful enough to protect us. I was wrong. The flash drive contains evidence of corruption at the highest levels. Politicians, federal agents, crime families, all of them connected, all of them complicit. It's my insurance policy and my death warrant, depending on who gets it first. I want you to know that I loved you more than anything in this world. Whatever happens, whatever you decide to do with this information, I'm proud of you. Be brave, Elena. Be smarter than your father. And don't trust anyone who says they're there to help unless they've proven it with their actions, not their words. I hope you never have to read this. I hope I find a way to keep us safe. But if I didn't, if the worst happened, then use this to be free. Use it to make sure the people who hurt our family answer for what they've done. I love you always, Dad. Elena couldn't stop the tears this time. They fell hot and fast, blurring the words her father had written 12 years ago, knowing he was going to die. Moretti's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steady, and she leaned into the contact without thinking. He knew, she choked out. He knew they were going to kill him, and he still tried to protect me. He succeeded. You're alive because of the choices he made. Moretti's voice was gentle. And now you have the power to finish what he started. Elena wiped her eyes and carefully picked up the flash drive. It was so small, barely larger than her thumb, and yet it contained enough information to bring down empires. Her father had died for this. Her mother had died for this. 12 years of her life had been stolen because of what was stored on this tiny piece of plastic and metal. We need to see what's on it, she said, her voice steadier now. Moretti pulled out a laptop from his desk and set it up on the coffee table. He took the flash drive from Elena with careful reverence, as if handling a live grenade, which, in a way, he was. The drive connected with a soft beep. A password prompt appeared on the screen. Elena stared at it, her mind racing. Her father would have chosen something she could figure out, but others wouldn't guess. Something personal but not obvious. Try my birthday, she said. 08152001. Moretti typed it in. Access denied. Your mother's birthday? I don't remember it. Elena pressed her hands to her temples, trying to think. Wait. Try the date they got married. June 12th, 1998, 0612-1998. Moretti entered it. The screen flickered and suddenly files began populating. Hundreds of them, meticulously organized into folders labeled by name and organization. Elena and Moretti stared at the screen in stunned silence. Then Moretti began opening files at random. Spreadsheets showing payments, scanned documents with signatures, email chains discussing bribes and favors, photos of men in expensive suits shaking hands with known criminals. This is incredible, Moretti breathed. Your father documented everything, dates, amounts, methods of payment, what each bribe was for. He scrolled through more files. This could bring down half the city's political establishment. Elena leaned closer, scanning names she recognized from news reports. A senator who'd campaigned on anti-corruption platforms while taking money from 3 different crime families. Federal judges who'd dismissed cases in exchange for offshore accounts. Police commissioners who'd looked the other way during investigations. And there, in a folder labeled Castellano Network, was the motherlode. Every transaction Victor Castellano had made through his foundation, every shell company he controlled, every politician he owned. The digital breadcrumbs of an empire built on blood and bribery, all laid out with forensic precision. This is what they killed my family for, Elena said quietly. This is why they've been hunting me. This is power, Moretti corrected. The kind of power that reshapes the entire landscape. With this, you could destroy everyone involved, or you could use it as leverage, force them to back off and leave you alone. What would you do? Elena asked, turning to look at him. Moretti's expression was complicated, layers of calculation and emotion warring beneath the surface. I'd use it to burn down the old guard and rebuild something better. But I've spent 12 years in this world. I know how to navigate it, how to survive it. His eyes met hers. You haven't. And that means you get to make a choice I never had. Whether to enter this life or walk away from it entirely. Walk away how? This evidence proves my father was killed by people who are still powerful, still dangerous. If I don't use it, what's to stop them from killing me anyway? Me. Moretti's voice was absolute. I told you I'd keep you alive, That doesn't change regardless of what you decide to do with the ledger. Elena stood and walked to the windows, staring out at the city spread below. Somewhere in that sprawl of steel and glass were the people who'd murdered her family, people who'd profited from corruption while her father died trying to expose them, people who'd sent gunmen to a fundraiser to finish a job they'd started 12 years ago. My father said to use this to be free, she said slowly. But what does that mean? Freedom from fear? Freedom from running? Or freedom to choose who I want to be? Maybe all of it. Moretti joined her at the window. The question is what kind of person you want to be. Someone who hides with evidence this powerful, or someone who uses it. Elena thought about the Plaza Astor, about Moretti's arms around her and cameras capturing every second, about the training session with Sophia that morning, learning to fight back instead of freeze, about her father's letter telling her to be brave and smart. I want them to know, she said finally. I want everyone who was involved in my family's murder to understand that I survived, that I have the evidence they've been terrified of for 12 years, that if they come for me again, I'll burn their entire world to the ground. Moretti's smile was sharp and approving. That's the right answer. But I'm not going to release it, not yet. Elena turned to face him fully. That's my leverage. As long as they know I have it, but don't know what I'll do with it, they have to negotiate. They have to treat me as a threat instead of a target. You're learning fast. Moretti's respect was genuine. That's exactly how you play this game. Make them fear you more than they want you dead. I need to make copies, multiple copies in multiple locations. Elena's mind was already racing ahead, planning contingencies. And I need insurance, something that triggers automatic release if anything happens to me. I can arrange both. Moretti pulled out his phone. I know people who specialize in this kind of thing. Dead man's switches, encrypted backups, secure locations. He paused. But Elena, once we start down this path, there's no going back. You'll be declaring yourself a player in a very dangerous game. I became a player the moment those gunmen walked into the fundraiser. Elena's voice was steady, certain. I just didn't know it yet. Now I do. And I'm choosing to play instead of being played. Moretti studied her for a long moment, and Elena could see him reassessing, recalibrating his understanding of who she was. Not the scared child he'd saved or the invisible server he'd claimed as his own, but someone emerging into her own power. All right, he said finally. Then let's make you untouchable. The rest of the day blurred past in a flurry of activity. Moretti made calls while Elena and Sophia created multiple encrypted copies of the flash drive's contents. Marco arrived with a secure laptop that had never touched any network, ensuring the files remained isolated. By evening, they had 5 backup copies stored in different locations, and Moretti's tech specialist had set up a dead man's switch that would automatically release everything to major news outlets if Elena failed to enter a code every 72 hours. It's not perfect, the specialist, a nervous man named David, who avoided eye contact, explained. But it's the best security I can give you. As long as you're alive and able to access the internet every 3 days, the files stay secret. If you disappear or die, everything goes public automatically. That'll do, Elena said. Her head ached from information overload and her stomach churned with anxiety, but she felt stronger than she had in years, like she was finally fighting back instead of just surviving. After David left, Moretti ordered dinner from somewhere that delivered food in actual china dishes. They ate in surprising comfort, the tension of the day giving way to exhaustion and relief. There's something else you should know, Moretti said as they finished. I made some calls about the chapel you mentioned. Found 3 possibilities within 50 miles of your old house that match your description. Elena set down her fork. And I think we should visit them. Tomorrow, if you're up for it. His expression was serious. If your father hid backup evidence in a chapel, we need to find it before someone else does. The ledger on the flash drive is comprehensive, but there might be additional information. Physical documents, original files, things that would strengthen the case even further. You think he made multiple copies? I think your father was thorough enough to create redundancy. The flash drive is excellent insurance, but original documents carry more weight in court. If we can find them, Moretti paused. We turn your leverage into a weapon capable of destroying everyone involved. Elena absorbed this, feeling the weight of responsibility settling heavier on her shoulders. Then we go tomorrow. It could be dangerous. If anyone's watching us, if anyone suspects what we're looking for, Then they'll try to stop us and discover I'm not as helpless as I used to be. Elena met his eyes steadily. I told you, Luca. I'm done running. Whatever comes next, I face it head on. Something shifted in Moretti's expression, an emotion Elena couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or recognition of something he saw in her that she was only beginning to see in herself. Get some rest, he said quietly. We leave early. And Elena? He waited until she looked at him. What you're doing, choosing to fight instead of hide, that takes courage most people never find. Your father would be proud. The words hit harder than Elena expected. Bringing tears, she blinked away quickly. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and retreated to the guest room. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her father's letter, and the flash drive, and the choice she'd made to become dangerous instead of invisible. Somewhere in the penthouse, she could hear Moretti moving around, his presence a strange comfort. He'd saved her twice now, once as a boy who'd defied his family, and again as a man who'd claimed her publicly to protect her. She didn't fully understand his motives, didn't know if his protection came from guilt or genuine care or some calculation she couldn't see. But he'd kept his promise. For 12 years he'd kept it. That had to mean something. Elena finally drifted off near dawn. Her dreams a confusion of music boxes and burning houses and strong arms carrying her toward safety. She woke to Sophia knocking on her door. We leave in 30 minutes, dress for hiking. The first chapel Luca wants to check is on rough terrain. Elena got ready quickly, pulling on jeans, boots, and a jacket Sophia had left for her. In the kitchen, Moretti was already dressed in dark pants and a weathered leather jacket, looking more like someone heading into dangerous territory than the polished crime boss from the fundraiser. Ready? He asked, handing her a travel mug of coffee. As I'll ever be. The drive out of the city felt different this time. Elena wasn't running toward her past with dread, but with purpose. She was hunting for answers, for power, for the final pieces of her father's puzzle, and she wasn't doing it alone. Moretti had brought a smaller security team this time, just Marco and Sophia, plus one other man whose name Elena hadn't caught. They traveled in 2 vehicles, taking a route that wound through increasingly rural areas until the city was a distant memory behind them. The first chapel sat on a hill overlooking a small river, exactly as Elena had described. Stone walls covered in ivy, a weathered angel statue guarding the entrance, the smell of old wood and older faith seeping from every crack in the foundation. Elena stood at the entrance and memory slammed into her with physical force. She'd been here. She remembered the angel statue, remembered her father's tense shoulders as he'd told her to wait in the car, remembered watching him disappear inside. This is it, she said. This is where he brought me. Moretti gestured to Marco and Sophia. Secure the perimeter. No one comes in or out except us. They entered the chapel together, their footsteps echoing on stone floors. The interior was dim and dusty, pews arranged in neat rows facing a simple altar. Stained glass windows filtered colored light across surfaces that hadn't seen regular worship in years. What are we looking for? Elena asked, her voice hushed in the sacred space. Your father spent time here alone. That means he either met with someone or hid something. Moretti began moving through the space systematically, checking beneath pews, examining the altar, running his hands along the walls. Look for anything that seems out of place. Loose stones, hidden compartments, anything that could conceal documents. Elena searched the opposite side of the chapel, her heart pounding. This place held answers. She could feel it. Her father had brought her here for a reason, had risked the time and exposure to visit this specific location in his final days. She was examining the wall behind the altar when her fingers found it, a stone that shifted slightly when pressed. Elena's breath caught. Luca! He was beside her instantly. Together they worked at the loose stone until it came free, revealing a hollow space behind it. Inside was a metal box, sealed and surprisingly heavy. Moretti pulled it out carefully and set it on the altar. The box was locked, but a few moments with a small tool from his pocket, and the mechanism gave way. The lid opened with a protest of old hinges. Inside were folders, physical documents, each one meticulously labeled and organized. Elena recognized her father's handwriting on the tabs, dates, names, transaction details. Everything from the flash drive, but in original form. Bank statements with real signatures, contracts signed in ink, photographs that showed faces clearly, without digital manipulation. This is it, Moretti breathed. This is everything we need. Original evidence that can't be disputed or dismissed as fabricated. Elena reached for one of the folders, her hands shaking. Inside were documents showing payments from Victor Castellano to a federal judge. The same judge who'd overseen her family's case, who'd sealed the investigation, who'd declared the fire an accident and closed the matter without further inquiry. The judge who'd helped cover up her family's murder was right there in black and white, his signature on receipts for payments that totaled over $2 million. They weren't just killed, Elena said, her voice hollow. The whole system was rigged to make sure no one would ever investigate. No one would ever know the truth. Until now. Moretti carefully gathered the folders. Now you have both digital and physical proof. Now you have everything you need to... The sound of gunfire outside cut him off mid-sentence. Moretti's entire demeanor changed in an instant, going from focused to combat-ready. He pulled a gun from beneath his jacket and moved toward the chapel entrance with fluid precision. "Stay here," he ordered Elena. "Get behind the altar and don't move until I come back." "What's happening?" "Someone followed us, or someone was already here waiting." His expression was grim. "Either way, they're not getting these documents. Or you." More gunfire erupted, closer now. Elena could hear shouting, the sharp crack of weapons, the sounds of a firefight happening just outside the chapel walls. Moretti pressed the metal box into her hands. "If I don't come back, there's a door behind the altar that leads to a tunnel. Follow it to the river. Marco knows to meet you there if things go wrong. Luca, promise me you'll run if you have to. Promise me you won't let them get you or the evidence." His eyes held hers with desperate intensity. "Everything your father died for, everything we've fought for. It only matters if you survive to use it." Elena's throat tightened, but she nodded. "I promise." Moretti squeezed her shoulder once, hard, then turned and moved toward the entrance with the predatory grace of someone who'd done this before. Elena watched him disappear into the sunlight beyond, then scrambled behind the altar, clutching the metal box to her chest. The gunfire intensified. She could hear Moretti's voice shouting orders, Sophia's sharp responses, the deeper boom of Marco's weapon. But there were other voices too, unfamiliar ones, men coordinating an assault with military precision. Elena's hand shook as she found the door Moretti had mentioned, hidden behind a tapestry depicting saints and martyrs. It opened to reveal stone steps descending into darkness. She hesitated, torn between the promise she'd made and the desperate need to know if Moretti would survive. Then she heard new voices inside the chapel, footsteps on stone, men who'd breached the perimeter despite Moretti's team. "Find the girl," someone commanded, "and get those documents. Kill anyone who gets in the way." Elena didn't hesitate anymore. She plunged into the darkness of the tunnel, pulling the door shut behind her, and ran. The tunnel was older than the chapel above, carved from stone by hands that had been dust for centuries. Elena's boots slipped on the damp steps as she descended. The metal box clutched against her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, muffled by stone and earth, the gunfire continued in sporadic bursts that made her flinch with each crack. She'd left him, left Moretti and his team to fight while she ran into the darkness like she'd been running her whole life. The guilt was a physical weight, but so was the promise she'd made. So was the box in her arms containing everything her father had died to protect. The tunnel leveled out, stretching ahead into blackness, broken only by occasional shafts of light filtering through cracks in the ancient stone. Elena ran blindly, one hand trailing along the wall to keep her oriented, her other arm locked around the box. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The air smelled of earth and rot and time. She didn't know how long she ran. Minutes? Hours? Time lost meaning in the suffocating dark. Her lungs burned and her legs trembled with exhaustion, but she didn't stop until the tunnel opened suddenly onto the riverbank, exactly as Moretti had promised. Elena stumbled into daylight, blinking against the sudden brightness. The river flowed past with deceptive calm, its surface reflecting clouds and sky. She scanned the area desperately, looking for Marco, for any sign of Moretti's people. Nothing. She was alone with her father's evidence and the sound of her own ragged breathing. Elena sank onto a fallen log, still clutching the box, and forced herself to think. She had no phone. It was still in the SUV back at the chapel. No weapon except the small knife Sophia had given her during their training. No way to know if Moretti was alive or dead, if his team had survived or been overwhelmed. She was on her own. Again, just like she'd been at 12 years old, hiding in a closet while her world burned down around her. No. Elena straightened her spine, forced steel into her trembling muscles. She wasn't that terrified child anymore. She'd made a choice to fight, to be dangerous instead of helpless, and that meant figuring out her next move instead of freezing in panic. The sound of an engine made her head snap up. A black SUV was making its way down the narrow access road that ran parallel to the river. Elena's hand went to the knife at her belt, her body tensing to run or fight depending on who emerged from that vehicle. The passenger door opened and Marco stepped out, scanning the area with professional efficiency. When he spotted Elena, relief flashed across his usually stoic face. "Miss Vasquez, thank God." He jogged toward her. "We need to move. Now." "Luca," Elena's voice cracked. "Is he—" "Alive, pissed off, but alive." Marco was already guiding her toward the SUV. He held them off long enough for us to regroup, but there were too many. We had to fall back. "He'll meet us at the safe house." Elena let herself be bundled into the vehicle, the box still locked in her arms. Sophia was driving, her jaw tight, and a fresh cut above her eyebrow bleeding sluggishly. The SUV lurched into motion before Elena's door was fully closed. "Who were they?" Elena demanded. "Who attacked us?" "Castellano's people," Sophia said grimly. "Professional military contractors, not street thugs. Someone knew we'd be at that chapel. Someone knew exactly what we were looking for." "A leak," Elena breathed. The implications crashed over her. Someone in Luca's organization told them. Or someone's been tracking our movements better than we realized. Marco was on his phone, speaking in rapid Italian. When he hung up, his expression was dark. "Luca says to bring you to the Riverside property. He's already en route." The drive took 40 minutes of tense silence, broken only by Marco's periodic check-ins with their security network. They traveled on back roads, taking a route so circuitous that Elena lost all sense of direction. Finally, they pulled up to what looked like an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the river, its windows dark and its exterior deliberately decrepit. Inside was a different story. The warehouse had been converted into a fortress, with security systems visible at every entrance and armed guards posted at strategic points. Moretti was pacing near a bank of monitors when Elena entered, his jacket gone and blood staining his shirt sleeve. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and the relief that crossed his face was so raw it made Elena's chest tighten. "You made it," he said, closing the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, his eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. "You're not hurt?" "I'm fine. You're bleeding." "Graze. Nothing serious." But he didn't let go of her, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones like he needed the physical contact to believe she was real. "I thought, when they breached the chapel, when you didn't answer, I kept my promise. I ran." Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. "Just like you told me to." Something complicated moved through Moretti's expression. Then he pulled her against his chest in a fierce embrace that had nothing to do with performance or protection and everything to do with naked fear finally releasing its grip. Elena let herself lean into his strength, let herself take comfort from the solid reality of his heartbeat against her ear. They stood like that for a long moment before Moretti finally pulled back. His hand slid down to her shoulders, then to the metal box she still held. "You got them out. The documents. Everything my father hid. Everything we need." Elena's fingers tightened on the box. "But they knew, Luca. They knew we'd be at that chapel. How?" Moretti's expression went cold and calculating. "That's what we're going to find out. Right now." He led her deeper into the warehouse to a room set up as a makeshift command center. Multiple screens showed security feeds, maps, and what looked like surveillance photos. A woman Elena didn't recognize sat at a computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "This is Nina," Moretti said. "Best tracker in the business. Nina, show Elena what you found." Nina pulled up a series of photos on the main screen. They showed Elena and Moretti at various locations over the past 3 days, leaving his penthouse, arriving at the Connecticut house, entering the diner. The photos were high quality, clearly taken by someone with professional equipment and unlimited access. "Someone's been following you since the night of the fundraiser," Nina explained. "Not one of Castellano's usual people. This is someone with resources and training, someone who knows how to stay invisible while maintaining constant surveillance." "Federal," Moretti said grimly. "Has to be. No one else would have this kind of access without us noticing." Elena's stomach dropped. "You think one of the corrupt agents from my father's ledger is behind this?" I think someone with everything to lose found out you were alive and decided to finish the job personally. Moretti pulled up another screen, this one showing a grainy photo of a man in his 50s, silver-haired and distinguished. Recognize him? Elena studied the face, and memory stirred. He was at the fundraiser, talking to Victor Castellano. His name is Robert Chen, federal agent for 30 years, currently assigned to Organized Crime Task Force. Moretti's voice was ice. Also on your father's payroll list for $2.5 million over a decade. He's the one who sealed the investigation into your family's deaths. And he's the one who's been hunting you ever since Castellano told him you'd surfaced. So what do we do? Elena demanded. We have the evidence. We can expose him, destroy him, and make him desperate enough to do something catastrophic. Moretti shook his head. Right now he thinks we're scattered, wounded, maybe even that we lost the documents in the attack. That gives us a window. A window for what? Moretti's smile was sharp and dangerous. To set a trap. Let him think he's won, draw him and Castellano into the open, then destroy them both when they're vulnerable. Elena processed this, her mind working through implications and risks. You want to use me as bait. I want to use us as bait. Together. Moretti's eyes held hers. We make a public appearance, somewhere high profile and impossible to attack directly. We let it leak that we have the documents but are willing to negotiate. They'll see it as a chance to recover the evidence and eliminate the threat. And when they show up, we spring the trap, Elena finished. Understanding was dawning, cold and clear. But if it goes wrong, the dead man switch triggers and everything goes public anyway. Either we win or they lose. There's no scenario where they walk away clean. Moretti moved closer, his voice dropping. But I won't force this on you, Elena. This is your choice. Your evidence, your risk, your life. If you want to walk away, release everything anonymously and disappear into witness protection again, I'll make it happen. Elena thought about her father's letter, about 12 years of running and hiding and being invisible, about the Plaza Astor and the chapel, and every moment since when she'd chosen to fight instead of flee. No more running, she said firmly. We end this. Together. Moretti's expression shifted into something like pride mixed with fierce protectiveness. Then we do this smart. Nina, start spreading the word through our usual channels. Make it look like we're panicking, trying to set up a meet with Castellano. Somewhere public enough that they'll think we're scared of a direct confrontation. The Riverside Gala, Nina suggested immediately, 3 days from now. Black tie charity event, 500 guests, maximum security. It's the kind of place they'd expect you to choose if you wanted protection from crowds and cameras. Perfect. Moretti turned back to Elena. Can you play the role? Scared girlfriend, in over her head, desperate to make a deal? Elena thought about every moment of the past 12 years when she'd made herself invisible, unnoticed, beneath attention. About the server's uniform, and the downcast eyes and the art of being overlooked. She'd been playing roles her whole life. I can play anything you need, she said. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Moretti's team worked around the clock, planning contingencies and backup plans and escape routes. Elena trained with Sofia every morning, learning to move in the designer dress Moretti had selected for the gala, learning to maintain her role while staying alert for threats. And every night, after the planning sessions ended and the security team retired to their posts, Elena and Moretti would sit together in the warehouse's makeshift living quarters and talk about her childhood before the massacre, about his rise through his family's organization, about the choices that had led them both to this moment. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked one night, curled in a chair while Moretti nursed a whiskey. Saving me, starting all of this. Moretti was quiet for a long moment. I regret a lot of things I've done in my life. A lot of choices I can't take back, but you? He looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Saving you is the one thing I've never doubted, even when it cost me, even when it would have been easier to let you go. Why? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Why does it matter so much? Because you're proof that I'm more than what this life made me. You're proof that somewhere under all the violence and compromise and necessary evil, there's still a part of me capable of doing the right thing just because it's right. He set down his glass. Keeping you alive keeps that part of me alive, and I'm not ready to let it die yet. Elena didn't have words for the emotion swelling in her chest, so instead she crossed the small space between them and kissed him, pouring 12 years of survival and 3 days of partnership and the terrifying intimacy of trusting someone with your life into the contact. Moretti responded with an intensity that made her breathless, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness even as the kiss deepened into something that had nothing to do with performance or protection and everything to do with raw, desperate connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Moretti rested his forehead against hers. "After this is over," he said quietly, "after we've destroyed them and you're safe, ask me again if we're still pretending." Elena's smile was shaky but genuine. "After this is over, I will." The night of the gala arrived with crystalline clarity. Elena stood in front of the mirror in a midnight blue dress that hugged every curve, her hair swept up in an elegant twist, looking like someone who belonged in Moretti's world. But beneath the designer silk, she wore a thin Kevlar vest, and strapped to her thigh, invisible beneath the flowing skirt, was the knife Sophia had given her. Moretti appeared in the doorway, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, and his expression when he saw her made Elena's breath catch. "You look—" He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "Dangerous. You look dangerous." "Good." Elena turned to face him fully. "That's exactly what I was going for." They arrived at the gala in a convoy of vehicles, playing their roles perfectly. Moretti's hand at the small of Elena's back, possessive and protective. Elena's nervous glances, her body language suggesting a woman in over her head but clinging to her powerful boyfriend for safety. The cameras ate it up, flashbulbs popping as they entered the venue. Inside, the ballroom was even more opulent than the Plaza Astor had been. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, Manhattan's elite dressed in their finest. And scattered throughout the crowd, Elena recognized faces from her father's ledger. Politicians who'd taken bribes, judges who'd sealed investigations, federal agents who'd looked the other way. They were all here. All the people who'd profited from her family's murder, gathered in one place. Victor Castellanos stood near the bar, silver-haired and distinguished, playing the role of philanthropist, while his eyes tracked Moretti's movement with predatory focus. And beside him, speaking in low tones, was Agent Robert Chen. "They're here," Elena murmured, against Moretti's shoulder as they danced, maintaining their cover. "I see them. Marco's got eyes on both. Sophia's monitoring the exits." Moretti's hand tightened on her waist. "Chen's already signaling someone. They're making their move." The song ended and Moretti guided Elena toward the balcony, playing out the choreography they'd rehearsed. A private conversation, away from the crowd, where Castellano and Chen would think they could approach safely. The night air was cool against Elena's bare shoulders as they stepped outside. The city spread below them, oblivious to the confrontation about to unfold. "Mr. Moretti?" Castellano's voice was smooth as he stepped onto the balcony, Chen close behind. "And the mysterious Miss Vasquez. Or should I call you Elena? We've been looking for you for a very long time." Elena forced herself to shrink against Moretti, plain terrified. "Luca, you said this would be safe. It is safe." Moretti's voice was cold. "As long as everyone remembers we're in a room full of witnesses and cameras." "Of course." Castellano's smile never reached his eyes. "I just wanted to have a conversation about the materials your father accumulated, materials that I understand have recently resurfaced." "We don't know what you're talking about," Elena said, making her voice shake convincingly. "Please, don't insult our intelligence." Chen stepped forward, his hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. "You found the ledger. You found the backup documents, and now you're sitting on evidence that could destroy dozens of careers, including mine. So let's discuss terms." "Terms?" Moretti's laugh was harsh. "You think we want to negotiate? Everyone wants something." Castellano spread his hands in a reasonable gesture. "Money, power, protection. We can offer all of it. All we ask in return is the evidence and your silence. Surely that's worth more than the satisfaction of revenge." Elena felt Moretti's muscles tense, felt him preparing to give the signal, but she stepped forward before he could, shaking off her scared girlfriend persona like a snake shedding skin. "You're right," she said, her voice suddenly clear and strong. "Everyone wants something. My father wanted to protect his family. He died wanting that. My mother wanted her daughter to have a normal life. She died wanting that." Elena's eyes locked onto Castellanos. "And I want you to understand exactly how badly you miscalculated." Castellano's expression shifted from confident to confused. What? You thought we came here to negotiate. You thought we were scared, desperate, looking for a way out. Elena's smile was all teeth. We came here to make sure you'd all be in one place when the story broke. Chen's hand moved toward his gun. You're bluffing. If you'd release the evidence, every news outlet would already be receiving encrypted files from anonymous sources. Nina's voice came through the concealed earpiece Elena wore, broadcast simultaneously to the small speaker Moretti had planted on the balcony. Already done. Sent to the Times, the Post, the Washington Herald, and about a dozen investigative journalists known for taking down corrupt officials. Your career's just ended. You're just too stupid to lie down yet. The color drained from Chen's face. Castellano moved with surprising speed, drawing a small pistol from his jacket. But Moretti was faster, his own weapon appearing in his hand with practiced ease. I wouldn't, Moretti said softly. We're on a balcony overlooking a ballroom full of people. You fire that gun, and every phone in the building captures it on video. You really want your last act as a free man to be murdering a woman in front of 500 witnesses? You've destroyed everything, Castellano snarled. Decades of careful work, relationships built over lifetimes. You destroyed my family, Elena interrupted, her voice shaking with controlled fury. You killed my parents. You hunted a 12-year-old child for evidence you were too incompetent to find. You turned the justice system into a joke and made corruption the price of doing business in this city. She stepped closer, unafraid now. So yes, I destroyed your empire, and I'd do it again without hesitation. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Chen looked wildly around, searching for escape routes that didn't exist. Marco and Sophia had appeared at the balcony entrance, cutting off retreat. Inside the ballroom, confusion was spreading as people checked their phones, as news alerts started popping up, as the story Elena's father had died to tell finally broke into the light. It's over, Moretti said, his gun still trained on Castellano. Federal agents who aren't on your payroll are already on their way. You've got maybe 5 minutes before you're both in custody. You want to spend that time trying to shoot your way out? Or you want to start thinking about what kind of deal you can make with prosecutors? Castellano's hand trembled, the gun wavering between Elena and Moretti. For a long moment, the tension was sharp enough to cut. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, Elena said firmly. It is. The federal agents who arrived weren't the ones on Castellano's payroll. These were clean investigators from the Justice Department's Internal Affairs Division, brought in specifically to handle cases of corruption. They took Castellano and Chen into custody with professional efficiency, reading them their rights while news helicopters circled overhead. Inside the ballroom, chaos reigned. Guests were fleeing, phones were ringing, reporters were already crafting stories about the scandal of the decade. Elena stood at the balcony railing, watching it unfold with a strange sense of detachment. Moretti's hand found hers, warm and solid. You did it. Your father's evidence, your courage to use it. You brought them all down. We did it, Elena corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. So what happens now? Moretti asked, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. You've got your revenge. You're safe. The people who killed your family are going to prison. You could disappear again if you wanted. Start over somewhere new with a clean slate. Elena looked at their joined hands, at the tattooed serpent winding around his forearm, at the man who'd saved her twice and stood beside her through everything. She thought about invisibility and safety and the choice to be dangerous instead of hidden. I could, she agreed. Or I could stay. Build something new here. Something that uses the power I've earned instead of running from it. Moretti's expression shifted into something cautiously hopeful. Stay and do what? My father wanted to expose corruption. He died trying to create a system where people like Castellano couldn't profit from other people's misery. Elena turned to face Moretti fully. What if we finished what he started? Not just tearing down the old system, but building something better in its place? That's dangerous work. It'll make enemies. I know how to be dangerous now. Elena's smile was fierce. You taught me that. And I'm tired of letting fear dictate my choices. Moretti studied her for a long moment, and Elena could see him making calculations, weighing risks, deciding whether to protect her by pushing her away or trust her enough to let her stand beside him. All right, he said finally. We'll build something better, together. But Elena, he cupped her face gently. This means you're choosing my world. The violence, the complexity, the moral gray areas. Once you step into this life fully, there's no going back to invisible. I don't want invisible anymore. Elena leaned into his touch. I want power. I want purpose. I want to make sure what happened to my family never happens to anyone else. And I want... She paused, gathering courage. I want to see where this goes. Where we go. When we're not pretending anymore. Moretti's kiss was answer enough, fierce and claiming and achingly tender all at once. When they finally broke apart, the city spread below them and the future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer terrifying. 3 months later, Elena stood in the offices of the Vasquez Foundation, looking out over Manhattan from the 35th floor. The foundation had been her idea, a legitimate organization dedicated to fighting corruption, supporting whistleblowers, and helping families torn apart by organized crime. Funded initially by Moretti's legitimate businesses and growing rapidly as donors who'd been waiting for someone to take a stand came forward. Her father's legacy transformed from hidden evidence into active change. Moretti entered the office without knocking, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking significantly more relaxed than he had 3 months ago. The arrest stemming from the ledger had created a power vacuum he'd filled strategically, eliminating the worst elements while transitioning his family's operations toward legitimate enterprises. It was slow, complicated work, but he approached it with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. The Times just published another story, he said, handing her a coffee. 5 more indictments based on your father's evidence. That brings the total to 47. Of 47 corrupt officials who thought they were untouchable. Elena accepted the cup with a smile. My father would be proud. He'd be proud of you regardless. Moretti settled into the chair across from her desk. You've built something real here, Elena. Something that's actually changing things. We've built something real, she corrected. I couldn't do this without your connections, your resources, your protection. Our protection now. Moretti's smile was warm. The security team reports to you as much as they report to me. Elena laughed. Sophia still terrifies me during training sessions. Sophia terrifies everyone. That's why she's so good at her job. He paused, his expression growing more serious. There's something I wanted to talk to you about. A real estate opportunity in the Bronx, building that's been abandoned for years. Perfect location for a community center. I was thinking the foundation could acquire it, turn it into something that actually helps people. That's perfect. Elena pulled up the foundation's budget on her computer. We have the funding. I'll have our legal team start the paperwork. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, falling into the easy partnership they'd developed over the past months. Working together, planning together, building something that mattered. It felt right in a way nothing in Elena's life had felt right since before her family died. When the meeting ended and Moretti stood to leave, Elena caught his hand. Stay, she said quietly. For dinner. Or just to talk. Or, she gathered her courage. Or because I don't want you to go yet. Moretti's expression softened into something that made Elena's heart race. I thought you'd never ask. That night, they sat on Elena's balcony, a much more modest one than Moretti's penthouse offered, but hers, bought with foundation money and free from the weight of his family history. They shared takeout and wine and conversation that ranged from serious to silly and back again. Do you ever miss it? Moretti asked as the city lights began to glow. Being invisible. Having a simple life. Elena considered the question honestly. Sometimes I miss the safety of not mattering, but I don't miss feeling powerless. I don't miss running. She looked at him. And I definitely don't miss the person I was before all this. She was surviving, but she wasn't living. And now? Now I'm living, fully, completely, dangerously. Elena smiled. Now I'm choosing my own story instead of letting it be chosen for me. Moretti reached across the small table and took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her skin. I'm glad you chose to stay. Glad you chose this. Chose us. So am I. Elena squeezed his fingers. Though I have to ask, are we still pretending? It was the question she'd promised to ask 3 months ago, after everything was over. Moretti's smile was slow and genuine and completely unguarded. I stopped pretending the moment I pulled you into my arms at the Plaza Astor, he admitted. Maybe even before that. Maybe the moment I saw you trying so hard to be invisible and recognize something of myself in you. What did you recognize? Someone who'd spent their whole life playing a role, Someone who was so much more than what the world saw when they looked at you. His eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. Someone worth saving, worth protecting, worth, he paused, worth loving. Elena's breath caught. The word hung between them, enormous and terrifying, and exactly what she'd been feeling but hadn't dared to name. Luca, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. His voice was steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Everything I've done, every choice I've made since that night 12 years ago, it's all been because keeping you alive became more important than anything else in my life. And somewhere along the way, keeping you alive turned into wanting you happy, wanting you free, wanting you to choose me because you wanted to, not because you needed protection. Elena stood and moved around the table, settling herself in Moretti's lap with her arms around his neck. He held her carefully, like something precious, his face buried in her hair. I choose you, she said softly. Not because you saved me, not because you're powerful or connected, or can keep me safe. I choose you because you see me, really see me, and you still think I'm worth standing beside. Always, Moretti murmured against her temple. You're worth everything. They stayed like that as the city hummed around them, two people who'd found each other in violence and chaos and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The serpent tattoo on Moretti's arm seemed to shimmer in the dim light, no longer a symbol of threat but a reminder that power, real power, came from choosing what to protect instead of what to destroy. Elena had spent 12 years running from her past. 3 months ago, she'd stopped running and started fighting. And now, with Moretti's arms around her and the future spread before them, like the glittering city below, she understood what her father had meant when he wrote that she should use the evidence to be free. Freedom wasn't about hiding or escaping or making yourself invisible. Freedom was about standing in the light, claiming your power, and daring the world to try and take it away. It was about choosing your own story and writing your own ending. And Elena's ending, or rather, her beginning, looked nothing like the scared 12-year-old hiding in a closet could have imagined. It looked like a foundation that changed lives, like a partnership built on trust and shared purpose, like a love that had grown from the ashes of trauma into something fierce and unbreakable. It looked like a woman who'd been invisible finally becoming impossible to ignore. 5 minutes could change everything. At the Plaza Astor, 5 minutes had destroyed Elena's carefully constructed invisibility and thrust her into Moretti's dangerous world. But those same 5 minutes had also given her the courage to fight back, to reclaim her name, to transform her father's death into a catalyst for change. The little girl who'd survived a massacre had grown into a woman who'd brought down an empire of corruption. And the boy who'd saved her despite orders to kill had become the man who stood beside her as an equal partner, not just a protector. Together, they would build something better. Together, they would use their power to help others instead of just accumulating more. Together, they would prove that even in the darkest corners of humanity, redemption was possible for those brave enough to reach for it. Elena looked out over the city that had tried to bury her and smiled. The serpent that had once coiled at her throat as a threat now represented something different: transformation, rebirth, the shedding of old skin to reveal something stronger underneath. She was Elena Vasquez, daughter of murdered parents, survivor of 12 years in hiding, destroyer of corrupt empires, builder of legitimate power, and finally, gloriously, completely herself. This time, when 5 minutes changed everything, she was the one writing the ending. And it was exactly the ending she chose.